Record. Okay, now we're recording again. And now I will share again. Oh, this is a complicated thing. And failing to pay back debts, having debts that you're not able to pay back, that's very stressful. That can, and fatigue, just exhaustion, working hard. A hard life. This, especially right now with COVID, because we have so many things against us we're not able to get out and do because we're not supposed to be out in public very much or be in large groups. So it must be very hard for like ministers to take care of their ministries and their churches and their congregations because they're not supposed to get together, and so there wouldn't be as many collections. And so the stressor is the thing that triggers our stress, and it can be any of those things we just talked about and lots more for you, whatever the stressor is that is worrying you. But it's not the stressor's fault. It's not the stressor that's the problem. It's what we think of the stressor. And when we evaluate and we think, is this a challenge or a threat? Is this something that's dangerous for me? Is it something that's going to take away something from me? Am I going to lose because of it? Or is it a challenge, a potential for growth and to gain something? So we have that second of appraising which one of those it is. And if it's a challenge, then we think of, what do we have that we can deal with this threat? How can we do we have the resources that we need to be able to go ahead and succeed at this? So if you think that it's a threat and you think that it's going to lead to harm, you might say, well, what are my options if this is harmful? What should I do? Is it a low threat, something that I can avoid? Or is it a high threat, something that's very dangerous, like COVID? COVID-19 would be a high threat. So some people would think of it as a challenge if they were if we're talking about COVID, if that's an example, if you start a new business that helps people cope with COVID, or if you, like our chaplains groups have all gotten together into a big group and we all support each other and have webinars and all kinds of support and teaching. And so it's become an opportunity for growth for us as chaplains, rather than something that's terrifying, would keep us just in a corner. So it's what you do with the stressor that makes it a threat or a challenge. We actually need some stress in our life. It's good for us. It's what keeps us at the top of our game. It's what helps us to be really productive and gives us the energy that we need. Our adrenaline glands start pumping and we have this big rush of ideas and energy, and that's called eustress. Am I saying it right, Roseanne? Eustress. So as you get more and more excited, pumped up, and ready to face the challenge, you're actually the best you can be. But if the stress continues on past that point, then, or the stress, you're not able to deal with the stress the way you thought you were, then it becomes distress. And the longer that continues, and with high stress, you can have illness and emotional challenges and exhaustion and fatigue. So you really want to kind of keep in this area here. And Roseanne has in her video that she made the other night, please have a look at it if you haven't already. She's done a wonderful job of explaining the fight, flight, and freeze. So our bodies have wonderful metabolism or mechanisms inside them to help us deal with any kind of a challenge. So if you were considering thinking about, back in the time when men had to run after animals and they saw an animal that was good that they wanted to hunt after, they would have all the energy they could to run after it. Or if a bear or a lion came and frightened them, they'd have all the energy they need to run away from it. So that would be the flight. Or if you saw an army coming towards you, you'd be able to fight it and protect your family and your village. And but then the problem is we don't have all the time lions running after us anymore. And we don't have to, some people have to go out and fight in an army, but not everyone. But these same mechanisms inside of us well up when we have a fight with our spouse, or when we're in traffic and someone's driving badly, and the same kind of thing. The adrenaline kicks in and our body says, what am I supposed to do with this? It's overwhelming to us. So it can become a problem rather than the help that it was intended to be. So we each have something that we do kind of automatically. Some of you, when you're faced with a problem, you want to fight it. You get right in there, you want to do something about it, and you're maybe a little bit aggressive about it. Some just want to fly away, get away from it all. I don't want to talk about the problem right now. I just leave me alone. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go for a walk. I'm not talking to you. See, and then some people just shut down. Some people just, I don't want to. I climb into bed and I don't want to talk about it, and I have no energy to do anything, and so my body just kind of closes down. We actually, any of those three mechanisms we could use, each one of us, but we all have one that we kind of gravitate to. And oh, there's another person coming in. Oh, it let me let him in this time. Good. Yeah, so we need to try and be calm and rational, do some of Roseanne's breathing exercises, bring our blood pressure down a little bit, think with our front brain instead of our back brain, not our animal instinctive brain, but our frontal lobe developed brain, spiritual brain that says you can choose something better than having a war right now. So stress affects our whole body. It makes our pupils dilate so that we can see more accurately. Our respiration quickens so that we have more breath to help us run this danger race. Our heart increases, so our blood is flowing faster. We start to perspire. Our muscles tense. And I think Roseanne even talked a little bit about what was going on inside your brain, the blood flow to your brain. I know when my daughter took self-defense, they said when someone grabs you, you would go, and you kind of go into shock. And so what you should do is breathe out and go, and that starts your brain again. When you go into shock, everything shuts down. When you start breathing again, then you can have the use of your mind and your body again. So that's something important to remember, why breathing is so important. So this is something that I learned for the first time when I was doing this, a general adaptation syndrome. And Hans Selye identified it in 1950. So he called the first phase the alarm phase, when you first hear about what the stressor is and start to evaluate it. The resistance phase is when we cope with it. We figure out what we're going to do and we do it. But the body's amazing that it can deal with issues, stressful issues, for great periods of time. But then if it goes on too long, we start to break down, or emotionally, physically, we start to be depleted. And so then we're in the exhaustion phase. You talked about that, Moses, with work, how you get so worn out, worn down. We can't function anymore. And he says the exhaustion phase comes from an accumulation of many fight or flight responses over a long period of time. And even it can be when you've been through trauma, you can be hyper vigilant. You've always been trying to protect yourself from danger for so long, that now you're doing it automatically when it's not needed. You're hyper vigilant with your children, or with your spouse, or with your health, and that is counterproductive. So this is the little diagram that they put in our book. There's no way that Roseanne and I could give you the amount of wonderful information that's in that textbook that we've been allowed to use. So please, if you can at all, get onto a a laptop or a tablet or something, so you can have a look at some of the great things that are on there. This was one of the little, this is the alarm reaction. So you can see this is your normal level of functioning. So when you're alarmed, when you first deal with a stress, you're under, your body's not functioning as well because you're just getting used to the shock of it all. But then you rise to the occasion, you come through with some action and you follow through with it and you're dealing with it. But then if it goes on too long, great stress for too long, then you're exhausted. So that was a good example, good drawing. These are the glands that are involved in our fight, flight, or freeze. Our hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, which does so much in our bodies, and the adrenaline glands. This is where your energy comes from, on top of your kidneys, in the back. So when a person first perceives something stressful, the sympathetic nervous system triggers arousal by the release of adrenaline, and that's that rush that you feel of energy. Release of these hormones activates fight or flight responses to stress, such as accelerated heart rate, perspiration, respiration, and at the same time, I can't see what's under there, which is primarily endocrine in nature, especially active works. I'm going to post this later, so I'll let you look through it because I can see they're telling us that we're going to go out shortly. But cortisol is the one I wanted to talk about. It's commonly known as a stress hormone and helps to provide that boost of energy that we first need when we encounter a stressor. But it's also the one that weakens our immune system. And it can make you have a big tummy. The weight that people carry around their middles is often attributed to too much cortisol in their system from too long under stress. It could also be from eating too many comfort foods. So signs of stress, everyone reacts differently. My dad would always get a tummy ache. Other people get a panic attack or headaches. This one, sweaty hands and feet, heartburn, nausea, sleeping all the time or not being able to sleep. Stress often keeps us awake. Difficulty concentrating, obsessive compulsive disorders. That's like the hypervigilance we just talked about. Social withdrawal or isolation, fatigue, irritability and anger, and weight gain or weight loss. Sometimes people don't want to eat when they're under stress. And consistent feelings of being overwhelmed or overloaded, and that leads to burnout. So we talked a little bit about this with Moses, about the burnout where you're trying so hard, you're working hard, but you maybe too much pressure, too much work, not enough support, not enough resources. And then over the long term, it can start to give you not just burnout, but also physical damage like cardiovascular disease, can cause a stroke because your blood pressure has gone high, can cause depression and a weakened immune system. And if you're in a situation where you're discriminated against, if for your culture, for your sexual orientation, for your level of income, or bullying, just because one person wants to have power over another. If you have that over a long period of time, it wears down on your body and you're more likely to have illness and emotional damage from it. Burnout is a reaction to prolonged or chronic job stress and is characterized by three main dimensions: exhaustion, cynicism, and feelings of reduced professional ability. So you just stop thinking that you're doing a good job. You don't want to go into work anymore. You're too tired. You're not excited by it anymore. You're worried that you actually could be doing it wrong or causing damage. And so it just takes the joy out of your profession, out of your work. This is a wonderful article. I won't go into it right now, but please look at it, and it helps you understand burnout a little bit better. So this is what stress looks like as compared to burnout. So stress is characterized by over engagement. You're working too hard, giving too much. Burnout is when you just shut down and you're not doing very much at all. In stress, your emotions are overreactive, you're hyper. But in burnout, you've lost your joy and your emotions are blunted and you've lost your excitement about work. Stress produces urgency and hyperactivity, and burnout produces helplessness and hopelessness. Stress is loss of energy. They just said hyperactivity though. Anyway, burnout is loss of motivation, ideals, and hope. Stress leads to anxiety disorders, and burnout leads to detachment and depression. So when you have someone sitting in front of you in your office and they tell you, these are my symptoms, this is what I feel, you can say, that sounds more like stress to me, or that sounds more like burnout. In stress, the primary damage is physical. In burnout, the primary damage is emotional. Stress can kill you prematurely by causing illness. Burnout may just make life seem not worth living anymore.
You mentioned it sounds like the urgency and the hyperactivity and the loss of energy are different. I think one of the things is hyperactivity is it's hard to sit still. But the loss of energy is, even though I can't sit still, I don't have the energy to do anything. So I'm wandering aimlessly around the house, but I can't bring myself to get organized enough and be energetic enough to make supper or clean up. So it's like I'm jittery, but I don't have the energy to focus on something. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you for that. That does make sense. So learned helplessness was a concept that was discovered by Martin Seligman when he did terrible experiments on sweet little puppy dogs. It makes me cry what they did in the name of science to learn these things, but it's important that we learn them. So these dogs were given electric shocks, and they could have the opportunity to jump over a partition to save themselves from the shocks. But the ones who received shocks that they could not escape just gave up. They just laid down. They didn't even try anymore. But in comparison, the dogs who were allowed to escape the shocks learned that they could do that and did it. And so they were able to minimize how much discomfort they had. So that's so similar to the people that come to us that are experiencing depression, who've had negative life experiences for a long, long time and haven't been able to impact that to save themselves from it, and they just give up. That's why women sometimes take so long to leave an abusive relationship, because they've tried and they haven't been able to stop it, and they just stop even trying. They just say, oh well, I must deserve it, it must be normal. And so people learn how to live in the midst of the pain, but we hope to help them discover that they do have a choice and that they can protect themselves from the damage and the shocks. So, and important.
There's another story that another research study that I just thought I'd add. They did a study where they partnered two monkeys. And the one monkey, every time the light went on, if it hit the button fast enough, it could stop the electric shock. The other monkey, no matter what it did, it would get shocked. Surprisingly enough, it was the monkey who felt like, I need to do something to stop this from happening, that ended up the sickest.
Really?
They kept, yes, because that monkey was constantly going, I need to react, I need to react. Whereas the other monkey could wander, like it was the floor of the cage was zappy. The other monkey could wander around and do things and groom itself and play. And then it would get a shock and go, well, that was unpleasant. But the other monkey felt like, I can't do anything except be ready to stop this. So it didn't get to enjoy life at all. So one of the things we know is sometimes what it's about is whether we get a break from those stresses.
Interesting. Yeah. That's a good concept. This is fun. I don't know if we're going to get bumped or not, but if we are, remember, just come back in again. But this is a chromosome. This is inside each cell of your body, It's filled with DNA. It's the little strand that has all the information on it that tells your body how a cell should divide, whether it's a kidney cell or a